All right, welcome everybody. We are here on June 22nd. I'm with Dr. Jeff Andresen once again to talk about the current weather conditions as seems like the only constant is change in our weather patterns
It
as we
is.
look right now. So Jeff, looking forward to your report this week. Thank you.
Well, many thanks and good morning or good afternoon, depending on timing. Start with, well, another reminder of the change that Kevin talked about here. On the left-hand side here, this is a current, or actually just a couple of hours ago, the upper air pattern across North America. But you look at this, and if you didn't have any labels here, the last thing you would guess, this is the third week the third week of June, right after solstice. You would rarely ever see a pattern like this. The big trough carved out, full amplitude trough. And what that's allowed, of course, to happen is to bring down at least out of the latitudes, out of the northern Canada. And we have ample evidence of that here this morning with temperatures ranging from, well, there's some low and mid 40s across the south part of the state, but we've even got some mid 30s reported across the northern lower, where it's a little bit drier right now. So unusually cold air here for this time of the year. And another thing is that really reflects on the pattern we've been in. Very strong high amplitude ridges and troughs. And we've seen that for much of the late winter and the spring and the summer thus far, and no really let up. But given this trough here right now, of course, what we see is unusual cold. On the right-hand side here, these are anomalous temperatures, and all the blues and the purples here are temperatures that are way below where they should be at this time of the year. And we're looking at a day today, right in the middle of that trough. We're only going to reach the mid and the upper 60s for high temperatures. And for late June, that's pretty tough to do, but we will see it here today. But there also are some changes. The trough is not going to be around here that long, but and I'll talk about those in just a second. I do want to start, though. There are other big changes, of course, that have occurred, especially across the southern part of the state. We finally got significant and was notable rainfall across the region, but these things often come with a little bit of a price. And one of the prices, we had a fairly significant severe weather outbreak across the Midwest here on Sunday evening, and then into some cases into the overnight hours. But you can see these are reports of individual storm damage. The reds are tornado reports. The blues are high wind damage. And then they're also, if you look closely, there are a couple greens in there. Those are reports of large hail. And we did see with one of the clusters of thunderstorms that moved right across the southern tier of counties of the lower peninsula on Sunday evening, that did cause quite a bit of severe weather, including now what looks like an EF0, a small, weak, but still a tornado across Lenawee County. But lots of reports of wind damage and also large hail. I did see one report of 2-inch hail in Berrien County. So in that part of the state, we finally got some severe weather with it. You can see that it was primarily, though, confined and restricted to the far southern part of the state. But the most important thing, I think, is that we finally did see significant widespread precipitation across much of southern lower. There were two major events here that occurred. And if we look on the right-hand side here, this is weekly precipitation, which does include, both late last week and then the event overnight Sunday and Monday. A large area here that arguably was the driest part of the state prior to that. Heavier note along the I-94 corridor, we did see some reports of actually a couple that were in excess of 5 and 6 inches. That was the top end of this. You can see a little bit of red and orange in there, but again, Kalamazoo area, which was one of the driest areas, and then eastward from that, especially picked up more than 4 inches. It did, though, importantly, a couple points. One is this was the most widespread precipitation. This was not spotty like much of what we've seen here before. Most significant we've seen in many areas in a couple months, but as you go northward, especially into the northern lower, you can see there the precipitation total or the totals were much, much lighter. And in many cases, again, less than ½ an inch and another drier than normal week. But again, we'll take the progress we can get. It's important to had to get some moisture there. So yes, long-term deficits still remain across most parts of the state, but they're less than they were. And that, again, the water will help certainly in the short term. We'll have to have continue more on a regular basis here to meet the demand. That's if you were going to start and take a big chunk out of the problems that we have with dryness, that was a good start. Temperature wise, we averaged out really close to normal on each side. You can see it was warmer than normal to our west and cooler than normal to our east. Michigan, again, right on a dividing line between two major weather patterns. So not much really noteworthy about the temperatures. I did want, though, to back to the moisture situation and talk about, this is the U.S. Drought Monitor, the current version of it, but it reflects conditions as of last week. There had been further deterioration across Michigan. More than 90% of the state is in some form of abnormal dryness. But the big news was that the area in the D2 or severe drought, which we don't see very often here in Michigan, that had expanded to almost 30% of the state. You can see the darker color here from the southwestern lower up towards Saginaw Bay and the thumb. There's another area of severe that also popped up here in the northwestern lower. Those were expanded and were new, and again reflected what was really a rapidly deterioration across the state. One other thing, across the lake in the northwest suburbs of Chicago and into southeastern Wisconsin, you can see a red. That's D3 or extreme drought. Very unusual here. That was introduced for the first time last week as well. And so I bring this up because hopefully this will be as bad as it gets. But before, of course, the rain and the precipitation we've had will certainly stop the deterioration and maybe even help here a little bit, but or put a dent in this. But conditions recent weeks, and you can see large portions of the upper Midwest from the northern Great Plains eastward into the Great Lakes here have major problems with dryness. It's the exact opposite as you go south of Michigan into the Ohio Valley and certainly down into the lower Mississippi Valley in the southeast. There, the problem has been too much water. And again, that has to do with that jet stream pattern that I talked about and being in the right place or the wrong place at the wrong time. And again, there's moisture there. A lot of it's fallen. It's just been in the same places. So look back here at the last 1 to 2 weeks, and thankfully did see some of that evening out or averaging out. One example of that, looking at the soil moisture across the U.S. situation on the left-hand side here, this is plant available moisture in the top 3 feet of the soil profile, and it looks pretty much like it did last week. We're down again less than 25% of that profile being available, which is way ahead of where it typically is year. But I think the more interesting graphic is on the right hand side here. This is the relative change of the same index, the top 3 feet, and you can see what really the physical impact of that, adding at least 2 in some cases 4 or more inches of precipitation. You can see quite a bit of green across the southern lower, and not just because I'm an MSU guy and appreciate that, but in this case we've added between 5 in some cases as much as 8% of that total profile back the water into that. That's phenomenal. That's a great change. In contrast, note here for the northern lower, we're back to another loss from, and again, if you look at the legend here, 2-3 in a week. And again, that just, you can't go on forever just withdrawing more and more water out of it. There's a limit there. So what we have seen in essence is yes, we've had some short-term, very, very beneficial rain in the south, but the center of that really dry area has shifted probably northward into the lower peninsula. And I think that's what this is also an illustration of. I mentioned temperatures near normal, and so we had near degree date accumulations that were near normal. We remain somewhere about a calendar week ahead of normal relative to total here goes back to the beginning of March. So most things phenologically that are dependent upon their environmental temperatures are ahead. Some cases it's as much as a week and a half now, but it's very similar to where we were last week. But where are we headed? And again, back to Kevin's, it's a theme of change. Although some things are going to be similar to where we were last week. Right here this morning, you can see the big H's here. This is that big Canadian origin air mass that I'm talking about that's dominating our weather. However, with that trough, there is unusually cold for the summer. It looks more like what we would see in late September. If you looked at a weather map and didn't know better, because of that cold air aloft, we will see rapid formation of clouds here today because of the stability. It doesn't take much heating. And remember, we're one day after solstice and the longest day of the year. We'll see some of that bubbling off and clouds will form, and probably see here this afternoon the formation of some showers and possibly some thunderstorms in that instability. There's another thing with this too, with this very active week, especially during the days. So look for winds to pick up gradually during the morning, and during the afternoon will be 15, 20, 25 mile per hour winds. Today they'll be out of the northwest. Tomorrow they'll shift more out of the west and southwest as the week goes on, but it will be fairly windy during the daytime. Another thing too about these, the activity this afternoon, we're not looking for any kind of large rainfall amounts. It'll be pretty scattered, but some of those that, again, that pick up a little bit of vertical growth, we could see some certainly lightning and thunder and maybe even some small pea-sized hail because of the. Keep an eye on that. It'll be a changeable situation, and most areas will not see rain, but the threat will certainly be there from the mid-afternoon into the very, very beginning of the evening. And then we'll go back tonight, overnight, another unusually cool overnight, but a little bit, a few degrees warmer than it was here this morning. Mostly mid and upper 40s north to low 50s south for lows tonight. After highs today, only in the mid and upper 60s. So a full 10 to 15 degrees below where we typically are at this time of the year. Again, more like the early fall than the summer. Off to our east, we begin to go back into return flow out of the southwest, and that's going to set the theme for the next several days. One of those themes is the Gulf of Mexico is going to be wide open. There's going to be all sorts of water vapor coming in from the south and southwest. We will see some increase in clouds tomorrow, a chance of another probably isolated shower, but most areas will remain dry. It will also be noticeably warmer tomorrow. We should see high temperatures tomorrow, probably in the mid, maybe even some upper 70s. So quite a bit more, 5 to 10 degrees on to what we have today. And then the next big weather system, and that's really I think the biggest story in the forecast. We've got another major system approaching. You can see it's a fairly diffuse at this point in time with a cold front here to the north with some cooler air. But by that point in time, the trough that's here now will have moved off to the east, and we're going to be more under southwesterly flow aloft the jet stream, and that's what's going to allow the low-level winds to come out of the south. And I mentioned the Gulf of Mexico opening up. Low pressure here forms in the central Great Plains, and this weather system will slowly, that's the other key, this is not going slowly approach Michigan and lead to the beginning or the development of showers and thunderstorms as early as late probably in the day in the far western part of the state, the western UP, maybe the western lower, but more likely overnight, Thursday into Friday morning, and then essentially continue for an extended period, at least 24 hours, maybe 36 hours, because again, the upper air flow and the surface flow are parallel to one another. So there's nothing moving very quickly. So that will mean probably similar to last week, if you were in the southern part of the state, periods of showers and thunderstorms. Continuing Friday and probably continuing into the early part of the day on Saturday. It looks, and one difference with this one, this will impact northern parts of the state as well. It's not just going to be the south like what we saw here over the weekend. This one will get the whole state, and you can see some of that here in this forecast, even for Thursday morning. So when we look at projected totals here for the whole week, the vast majority of these colors, and look at these totals, 1 to 2 inch totals. That's potential. That's maybe a little bit of aggressive on the part of the forecaster, but looking quarters to 1 inch totals, widespread, numerous, strong aerial coverage. All these things collectively mean that we are looking for another, again, probably really good drink here in terms of moisture. And again, most of this will be on Friday and into early Saturday. There will be after that some unsettled weather for Sunday and Monday with a continuing chance for showers, probably not heavy rainfall, but a continuing threat for rainfall, and then probably drier by the middle to latter part of next week again. But right now, the major story, I think, is on Friday with this weather system. In terms of potential evapotranspiration rates, less than they have been, definitely over the last couple of weeks here. You can see most of these are somewhere on the order of 0.16, 0.17 inches per day average. So not far away from the normals for this time of year, but definitely less than what we have seen over the last few weeks when we had elevated rates. Into the medium range forecast guidance, there are a couple themes. One of them, though, is here's the upper air forecast for the last few days of June and into the 1st of July. And you can see a lot of similarities with what we saw on the title slide with that trough over the eastern part of the US with a large ridge across the west. And given that, what's ultimately going to happen, the trough is going to move out, and ultimately we will see moderation or warming in temperatures. You can see for this particular time frame, they've got cooler than normal in the southern part of the state, maybe a little warmer in the north. We're between the two weather systems. The same is true for precipitation, with an area of drier than normal weather to our west and wetter than normal conditions to our south and east. We've seen that pattern repeated a lot over the spring and in the early summer. That's not new to us. Michigan, again, is somewhere in between. But what we think will happen ultimately is that this ridge edges a little bit further to the east, and we go in certainly into a warmer than normal pattern. Once again, that shows up here in the 3 to 4 week outlook. Mean temperatures forecast on the left, and you can see warmer than normal forecast for much of the northern half of the country, including Michigan, with no direction on precipitation totals. Drier than normal to our west, wetter than normal to our south, and that probably will be the case for much of the next several weeks. But again, the major message, I believe, is back to above normal probably some point in the early part of July. And finally here, the new long lead ensemble that was issued last week for the month of July, very similar to what you just saw, warmer than normal for the month of July and mean temperatures with no direction on precip. And that's essentially also the forecast for the latter half of the summer. Continues on the same pattern. So one bottom line is, yes, many areas are much better off in terms of water than they were certainly a week ago or 2 weeks ago. But with elevated temperatures, once again, our water demand will go up. And depending on we get that, we have not lost. Well, we certainly have issues. We definitely do in the northern part of the state still, and those are likely to continue. They're just it may take a little bit of time to redevelop, but we haven't seen the end of that, unfortunately. The issues with dryness. So wrapping up here, we've got more change coming, a gradual warming trend here. Threats of some showers, isolated or scattered showers here the next couple of days, but the big weather system coming, arriving overnight, Thursday, Friday, and continuing to Saturday. And with that, we are expecting, again, at this point, significant rainfall with more than parts of the state. And then the other theme, gradual warming, especially beginning the middle, latter part of next week into the early part of July. And that's pretty much where the medium and long-term guidance is pushing us in that direction. At least for mean temperatures. And with that, I'll wrap up and turn it back over to you, Kevin. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Good to see some rainfall. We certainly needed that relief, and especially with that forecast of potentially maybe warmer than normal coming up in July. So it helps us recover, because it's certainly been a strange start to the year with as dry as it was early on.
It is, and I've been I hear in Hazlet, my own with my measurements, I've had 3.73 inches of rain in just the last 2 weeks, which that's the most I've had in 2 weeks for the whole calendar year. It was the heaviest rainfall I've had since the middle of or precip since mid-March. But I was really impressed by how quickly we saw the landscape beginning at least to recover and green once again, maybe become a little bit more active again. But I had seen things like leaves dropping off of trees prematurely with the extended dryness are things we just typically don't see in the month of June. But this water here helps. And I know there are people in the northern part of the state that really, really need the water. And hopefully we'll see some of that here late in the week.
Yeah, excellent. All right, thank you, Jeff.
You bet.
We'll shoot for next weekend. Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.
You too.